But does that uniqueness mean being weird or different or kind of, rub people the wrong way?
Sure.
Or can that uniqueness actually be something that's attractive? Because I think that's something that our world is looking for, and that is authentic, unique people.
Right.
To me, that's very attractive, rather than just being kind of out there and different for different sake.
Yes.
Is there a difference between being holy and being awkward or weird? What does Jesus mean when he said we are to be in the world but not of it? And what does that look like? This is episode 25 of season 2 of Unhurried. I'm your host, Doug Kyle. Hey, Ryan, good to have you here today.
Hi, Doug. How are you?
As always,
Of course.
the regular part of our conversation. I love it. And we are going to get into it today a little bit on following up our discussion yesterday at church. But before we do that, we kind of tiptoed into something last week that I wanted to delve into a little bit more, and that is your man crush on Phil Wickham.
Yes. It was brought to my attention that we use the phrase man crush, and a lot of people commented on that, so it was kind of funny.
It's the right term, right?
It is very well. It's so funny because, and I don't. Maybe you don't feel like this, but at least for me, I was like, everyone knows, I love Phil. I think he's the best, but it's like, I don't know. Now I look back on like things that I've done in music and in worship, and I just like feel like just so cringy now because I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's such a blatant ripoff, where it's like, I feel embarrassed now.
Well, I was like, I did a little further research into Phil Wickham after your going, well, he's a C.S. Lewis fan, so that kind of endeared him to me.
Right.
But then I started to see some similarities between you and him.
See, that's why I think I feel like embarrassed now that like so much of, style, I guess. Just a blatant rip. It's not even, because they say like imitation is the highest form of flattery, right?
Yes.
It's a full on rip off is what it is.
Well, you're wearing a hat today. So
I am wearing a hat.
Those on YouTube can't see your. Did you just get your haircut?
I did get my haircut.
And is it exactly a Phil Wickham haircut?
Well, okay. If we really want to start diving into this, it gets bad really quickly for me.
Shoes too?
Well, shoes, yes.
Okay.
There was a picture that he posted on Instagram, and I had zoomed in and I texted it to Mandy and I said, "Can you please buy me these shoes?" So she found them online, and I don't know if they were the exact ones. I doubt it, but she found ones that in the likeness, I also have a friend, shout out to Kyle and Wes, who cuts Phil Wickham's hair, who has also cut my hair. So I'm telling you, if we really start diving in, it gets really embarrassing for me really quickly.
So when you go into the barber shop, you just say, "Give me the Phil"?
I sit down and I go, "You know what to do.
You know what to do." You've seen the posters.
You've seen it. Come on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
well, the man crush is alive and well. Once you mentioned that last week, I started to think about it, and there is quite a bit of play there.
Yes,
or similarity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Don't look too close because it'll be bad. I like to often tell myself or jokingly tell my band on Sundays that I'm Phil Wickham with a cold, because I don't have the range that Phil Wickham does. So but you'll hear it if you listen close enough,
I love it. Do we do a lot of Phil Wickham songs too on Sundays?
Yes, we do.
All right.
That's what I'm saying. Don't look too close, because then you'll start to figure out, you're like, oh, there's nothing original about this guy. He's just a copycat.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
Yeah. You, on the other hand, I feel like have a good way. You pull from C.S. Lewis and some other, Larry Osborne and things, but you uniquely make it your own. I am just a copycat.
I don't want to look like C.S. Lewis. I mean,
you don't look like him at all.
He's a fine man, but there's nothing in me that wants to.
You did study in England.
I did study there. That's
Right,
true.
right,
That's true.
right.
All right. Well, there I'll give you that.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, we had our first hat giveaway last week.
Yes, we did.
And so we have a second one to give away today. And the way you get a hat is you simply leave a comment on our YouTube page, or actually on this podcast, leave a comment, or you can send it to unhurriedpodcast@gmail.com, and you'll be entered in. We're going to do a random drawing. You can enter up to 3 times. We
Cool.
decided.
Yep.
All right. So up to 3 entries each week you can enter. And also, if you want to leave a nice comment, then please do. Even if you don't want a hat, you can still leave a comment. But we had a hat sighting in the wild, is the way it's been described to me. So do you remember last week I told you about the guy at Moster, the employee that wearing a hat?
Yeah.
Well, Nikki in our office told me this morning that she went to Moster over the weekend, and sure enough, there's this guy at the register wearing a Unhurried with Doug Kyle hat.
Nice.
And she's going, "What? Why are you wearing that hat?"
Yeah.
You know, and she goes, "Well," he explained the whole story, and she's going, "I know him." And she goes, "How do you know him?" And she goes, "Well, I've worked at the church for 20 years. You know, I've been a part of it for quite some time." And then she said, "I can't wait to tell him I saw a Doug Kyle, an Unhurried podcast hat sighting in the wild." We had our first sighting. So if you're at Mostra and you see a guy wearing a hat, his name is Brandon, and say hello to him and tell him you heard about him on the podcast.
Cool. Do we have any, I know that maybe we can have this discussion offline, but like if we do get more mugs or if we do get more hats, like are we going to continue giving them away and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I like it
because we had a new listener contact me this week.
Okay,
and they were like, "I missed out on the mugs."
Oh,
and I was like, "Well, you can still get a hat because those are still going on,
right?"
So I was like, "But if we get another round of mugs, you know, I'll let you know."
There's a chance we could.
Okay,
there's a chance because the donor who donated the first time said, "Hey, let me know."
Okay,
if you ever need more.
Okay.
So
all right,
we'll keep listening for that.
Okay, cool.
So that's a good heads up. All right, so we have actually like 13 people in the drawing this week.
Let's go.
So I've got one suit of cards was the hearts.
Yeah.
And I've got
nice
ace through king. I'm going to shuffle them, and I've assigned each one one of the cards to be selected. Also, I took out last week's winner, so she's not in the drawing anymore. Do you want to cut those?
Yeah, let's cut them.
Cut them one more time, and then let's turn it over, see what we got.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Mm-hmm. The Jack of Hearts goes to Daryl.
Hey!
Daryl. Congratulations, Daryl, for
Very
winning our second Unhurried hat giveaway.
Yeah.
So, Daryl, if you're listening, just catch us whenever you see us.
Very cool.
And we will we'll get you'll get to pick out your hat. That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, congrats, Daryl. Well, for the next few episodes, we're kind of leaning into this lessons from the desert. We're getting some sand in our sandals. We're learning lessons from the Israelites who traveled through the desert, and then we're entering in the promised land, and the instructions that Moses gave to the Israelites as they entered the land. Lessons about faith and about failure, about forgetfulness, and about what it means to be faithful and what it means to avoid fear and all of that. And they're really relevant topics for us today. And today I want to talk a little bit about the difference between being holy and being weird or being awkward.
Yes.
Because often those, what we think means holy really just means being a little bit
I like to
off.
often tease you and say that you're proper weird.
Wait a second. So you're saying I'm awkward,
but in a nice, in like a very nice way about it. Like me, for instance, I think I'm just weird all the time, and you're very proper weird. You know.
I still don't see how that's a compliment, but I appreciate that. I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, anyway, we're my whole point is going to be, I think we're supposed to, want to be holy, but not necessarily want to be weird. But I guess some of us can't help it.
We can't help it.
There's only so much you can do. To the degree that you can avoid being weird or awkward.
Yes.
Let's try to be holy and not necessarily weird or awkward.
There you go.
In our passage for this morning or today in this podcast, what I want to draw from is Deuteronomy 7:6, and the next few verses following that. God describes the people there, or Moses describes the people, that they are to be people holy to the Lord your God. And so this is a consistent theme throughout the scriptures from the earliest days till, of God's people through Jesus' day to the New Testament, the writing of the New Testament, and ever since, God's people have been called to be holy. And he goes on to describe them this way as a treasured possession of the Lord, chosen to be his people. And that's really holy means. Is holy means to be set apart, to be selected, handpicked by God, to be his people and to represent him and to reflect him, and to be his treasured possession. And so that's what holiness means. But it's often interpreted to mean that we are supposed to be just kind of different, and different would have an asterisk on it, like, different. Mm-hmm. Not exactly. He's kind of different.
He's different. He's out there.
He's different. So is that the case? Well, if you even look at this passage from Deuteronomy 7, the definition for holiness is that they are those who God set his affection on them. He's chosen them. And it says it's because the Lord loved you, and he gave you his promises that you are holy. And so holiness is really linked to our relationship with God and our ability to reflect him, and not necessarily that we are supposed to be different or above others or kind of just, kind of strange. But don't you feel like sometimes that's the way people take it? They almost take pride in the fact that they're awkwardly different from the world around them.
Yeah, very much so. And I also think that like you have a very unique way of setting our church and even our staff. You always kind of encourage us to do things in a very unique way that's very much our identity, to not do something that feels uncomfortable for us,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, we kind of maybe do things a little different, but it's kind of the GVC way, or it's the Doug way, and you encourage that too. So I think I know that's kind of what God was telling us in this, to be, we're set apart, we're chosen, we're his treasure, mm-hmm. but we're also a little different too.
Yeah, and maybe the word that I would use there is just I think what you're leaning into is the idea of uniqueness.
Yes.
That every believer and every church, for that matter, has its own unique signature, its own style, its own personality. And I think we should celebrate. We do celebrate that. We celebrate that big time around here.
Yeah, we do.
We foster that among our staff and among our people. But does that uniqueness mean being weird or different or kind of, rub people the wrong way?
Sure.
Or can that uniqueness actually be something that's attractive? Because I think that's something that our world is looking for, and that is authentic, unique people.
Right.
To me, that's very attractive, rather than just being kind of out there and different for different sake.
Yes,
just for the sake of being different, or the sake of being weird.
Yes, yeah. I know you and I share the same love for finding like a new, little coffee shop, or like a new thing that like nobody really knows. You and I kind of share in that, mm-hmm. that we try and find those little unique things. So I think it is something to be celebrated. I think can be endearing when you find something that's a little different, kind of goes against the curve a little bit, so yeah.
All right. Well, I want to circle back to that, because the idea of being unique, it can be distinguished from actually being different. Here's what I mean.
Yeah.
Way back in the day when I was I was a youth pastor at the time, just kind of starting out in ministry. There was a show, I don't know if I've ever told you this actually. There's this show on TV called Day of Discovery. Does that ring a bell?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've never told you this. So, Day of Discovery was this television show that was had these singers that it was a Bible teaching program, but they had this choir, this video choir, and I got to be a part of it. It's a long story of how I got to be a part of this.
Yes, I
story.
think I do remember this.
All right, and anyway, in order to be on it though, I had this really. In my opinion, for my early 20s, this really great-looking mustache at the time. I mean, at the time, that was in style.
Right.
It was in style to have this really bushy. I mean, the mustache entered the room before I did. It was just a big mustache.
Yeah, very Burt Reynolds.
Very Burt Reynolds-esque. If you know who Tom Selleck? Tom Selleck? Yeah. Exactly. It was definitely in that category. Except for mine was blonde, even though my hair was dark. My mustache was really blonde.
Yeah.
Anyway, in order to go on the show, that I got selected to be part of it, they made me shave my mustache. And the reason they said that I needed to shave my mustache is because mustaches were worldly.
Oh, well.
It was worldly to have a mustache. Come on. And so I'm going, what do you mean? It's like, look around. Everybody has everybody one. I know, all the guys I know that are my age.
Sure. Did you know a lot of worldly people at that time with mustaches?
No, I was a strong believer. I'm in a strong Christian, just out of Christian college and everything. But yeah, it was just, it was weird to me because they were a little bit behind the times.
Yes.
The show, it was good, but it was always sort of like a little bit behind. It was like,
sure.
That was considered worldly
to
have a mustache.
Yeah.
So
that's so funny you say that because I made a comment on Sunday.
Yeah.
Because myself and the two women that I had singing were all tatted.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I had made a joke, because we're all, various ages. And one of the singers, Bethany was like, "Oh no, this would not fly," 20 years ago. Like if she was singing at her home church, she was like, all of us would have been uninvited from singing, And I'm just like, how crazy the times have changed,
Yeah. So that's a great example because tattoos today are a little bit the way they looked at mustaches back then.
Yeah.
If you had a mustache, you were worldly,
right?
And so if you were going to be holy, you had to kind of be different from culture. You had to be kind of awkward, and old-fashioned, and stand out. Or stand out that way.
Yes,
stand out in not a good way.
Right.
And so, is that the case? Is that what it means to be holy? Is holy mean just avoid everything in culture and just be completely counterculture in an awkward and a strange kind of way? If everybody's got mustaches around you, all the guys you hang out with, but you can't have one because you're a Christian. Let's. I don't think so. I don't think that's what it means to be holy. And I want to point out some tendencies that could be creeping into us, all of us, as the listeners on this podcast, where we have exchanged the idea of biblical holiness for just being different.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, uniqueness is fine. But if you're just trying to be different to I don't want to be like culture, so I'm going to be odd. That's what I'm sort of, kind of warning people against. So, well, to be holy means to live in a way that reflects God's character. To be like God, everywhere that the Bible talks about us being holy is linked to His holy. It says, "Be holy," because God says, "Be holy because I am holy."
Mm-hmm. And
so the holiness of God is connected to our reflecting who God is. And if you think about it, God he attracts people. He doesn't repel people.
No.
He's a God that loves people and woos them and attracts them to Him. Jesus, when He walked the earth, was perfectly holy, yet people loved being around Him. Children ran to Him, sinners dined with Him, crowds followed Him. He was the holiest individuals ever walked the face of the earth, perfect in every way, and yet He wasn't repelling people or odd or strange in the sense of like, how come everybody wears this kind of toga, but he wears this kind of, he's like, he wasn't trying to be just different or odd or weird.
Right.
On the other hand, it was the religious leaders of the day who were the awkward ones. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that were thought holiness meant standing out and kind of being different from the culture and odd and strange. And I feel like we as believers can sort of be a little bit more like the Pharisees than like Jesus.
Right.
When it comes to holiness, we think of holiness as just being, I'm just going to have this completely different way about me. The religious leaders were, I love this story. One of the reasons that the Pharisees were kind of snickered at behind their backs is they were called the blind and bleeding Pharisees. And the reason is they would take commands of Scripture and then say, well, in order for me to be holy, I'm just going to make that even more extreme than it really is. So it says, do not look at a woman lustfully. And so they would see a beautiful woman walking down the street, and they would close their eyes, and they would run into buildings and obstacles and rocks and things. And so they were called the blind and bleeding Pharisees just because they were making such a show of how I am so religious that I will close my eyes and walk into buildings, rather than look in the wrong way upon a woman.
Right.
And so it's just this idea of just being, being awkward in your holiness rather than attractional.
Right. Well, and it's so, that's just the human nature, right? To just take something and go to the ultimate extreme. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you just go like, I think this is what Jesus meant, is that to be unique in a way that you're set apart from the rest of the world, but not in a distracting or misleading way. Yeah. To pull people into a relationship with Jesus, not to turn people away from it.
Right.
Because they don't want to be like you.
Exactly.
Really, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we want to be like Jesus, not like ourselves, you know, or you know what I mean by that? Like in a way of showing Jesus in a very unique way, but not distracting.
Right. Right. That's a great way to put it. Holiness, if we're going to reflect God's character of being a God that is that it has a positive draw in this world, then we're going to think about, and God is completely holy, then our holiness is going to kind of show up that way as well. If you think about the word salt and light are both very positive terms. Mm-hmm. Jesus told us that we would be salt and light in the world, and to be salt and light would be holy, but it's attractive. Salt was, added flavor to food. Light gave you the ability to see your way and guide your path. These are positive terms.
Yes. And I always looked at like that passage, like salt and light, of like salt also like preserves things too. They used to use it to preserve things.
Preservative, yeah.
And so I also think that it's like we're meant to preserve the teachings of Jesus, but not change too much about it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to change the man or the gospel. They're there. All we need to do is just represent that in a very loving and communal way that we can go like, listen, this is how Jesus has redeemed my life, and I'm just trying to share it with you, in a unique way.
Sometimes people take preservative, though, to not mean preserve the gospel, but preserve the old culture.
Right.
Of what it was like 20 years ago. Church 20 years ago, that's when it was really good.
That's when it was really good, yeah.
And so they just get stuck in that rather and saying, and then now they're no longer really reflecting a God who speaks to us today.
Yes. And that's the thing that is also, I mean, that's like with anything, right? Like you think about even like sports teams or I remember when I first, this is a random tangent, but when I first moved down here, I had made a joke, very tongue-in-cheek joke about Tony Gwynn, right? Okay. You're giving me the same face that the person gave me. Okay.
I know how that must have gone.
Well, forgive me. Okay. I had made it was just funny. It was just a funny joke. It was like something about Tony Gwynn and the Padres, and I was just like, oh, okay, and they were like, whoa. They're like, we're just going to stop you right there. They're like, listen, we'll joke about anything else. You just don't touch Tony Gwynn. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it was so in a way, it's like it is very human to find whatever moment is in our church life or our sports team life and go, that was the greatest. And we need to get back to that point instead of moving forward and accepting the new, right? The new songs or the new, new lights or the new way of doing the church or, new way of pulling people into the church and things like that, or new players on a sports team. It's like, we have to kind of accept the new, not forget about the old, but just kind of go with this in a new direction, but then God can also speak through that too,
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Good illustration. Good one.
Yeah. I know not to make jokes about Tony Gwynn anymore. So.
Yeah, it's like you came from.
I came from LA.
From LA,
so,
the edge of LA, Orange County. Came down here. It's like, you don't realize that we have a statue for him, and he's kind of a big deal.
He's kind of a big deal. But the one thing that I will say is, as a reformed Padre fan, as new into the Padre familyhood now.
Yes, welcome.
I will say it is a very welcoming family, so I am glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, misery loves company. That's the way it works. That's
okay.
Let me list a few awkward tendencies that we might all fall into.
Sure.
These would be indicators that we might be starting to see holiness in the category of just being weird and different, rather than in the category of being reflecting a loving, compassionate, gracious, and attractional God.
Sure.
The one thing is just when we fall into using religious cliches in social settings outside of the church. We're using these phrases and these words that people may or may not even understand or get, but we feel like if I'm going to be more holy if I drop a Christian phrase into the conversation.
Right.
I don't know if some of the phrases come to mind for you, but I remember I was at I was a young believer and I was trying to figure this whole thing out and was what does it mean to be different in the world and to be holy? And I remember I was going, I'm going to go out and talk to people about God, and I was at a mall, I think, and I thought, I'm going to just go stand over by that drinking fountain over there, and when someone takes a sip of water, I'm going to say, drink from that water and you'll thirst again. Kind of quoting Jesus from his episode with the woman at the well.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm going, oh my God. I kind of have this idea that if I use the exact phraseology, that God's word would have more power, and they would be like, they'd drop to their knees or something, go, I want to become a Christian now. But that was just being weird. That was not being holy. That was just being weird. I don't think I actually did it. I just had the idea to do it. Unfortunately, I think maybe, God intercepted that one.
Right.
But if we start using all these religious cliches or this phraseology or insider language that people outside the church don't understand, that to me is a tendency of getting weird rather than being holy.
Right. Well, all communities have a certain way of talking. So it's like, in a way, I think we should have like a kind of unique way of doing things, but we shouldn't do it at the sake of ostracizing someone or feeling like they're going to be ostracized, because they're like, oh, I'm not in the cool crowd. Like I'm not with the, with the cool clique or whatever, so yeah, it's tough, but you can try and navigate through it.
Sometimes it's just confusing too. You're just confusing people by using that language because they don't know what it means.
Right.
We all have come to terms with it.
Yes.
But outside of the church, I want to speak in ways that connect with people.
Yes.
And I think that is being holy.
Yeah.
Not throwing out terms that they don't understand.
Right. Like the one that comes up for me is always fellowship.
Yeah.
Right,
fellowship is a weird word.
That's a strange word, and then but we as churches, like we used to have like fellowship halls.
Yep,
there'd be like a fellowship time. Sometimes like in between services, And, we don't do it anymore, but it's like, that's such a funny phrase, fellowship.
We don't use it any other way, except for maybe like in medical fellowships or something like that.
Something.
It's more like academic fellowship rather than, the way we use it.
Right,
so
right.
If you go to a university and use that term, it's going to be misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the coffee shop and use it, it's probably going to be fellowship.
They're like, what?
Well, he's my fellow. What does that mean? He's your fellow. We don't really use the phraseology.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Another way that I think we can sort of have awkward tendencies is when you're anti everything in culture. If your thought is, if our world or our culture likes it, then I can't.
Right.
Then that, as if everything in culture is something to be avoided.
Mm-hmm.
If the phrase is anything that culture does, then you have to avoid it. But in reality, what holiness means is to reject the value systems of the world, the underlying selfishness or pride or materialism or the values that are there,
right.
Not everyday culture,
right.
not the things that the style, the way you interact, the terms you use, the clothes you wear, the facial hair that you have on your face or the tats you have on your arm.
Right.
All of those things are not necessarily indicators of the worldly values that we are meant to distinguish ourselves from.
Right. That was always unique about like music, right? Is that there was songs that we sang in church, and when I was growing up, it was still a lot of the older hymns, and it was still, like the Vineyard had just kind of come out with a record, and Hillsong, and, so it was like they were kind of ushering in, Michael W. Smith and those guys were kind of ushering in some different types of music. But I always kind of looked at it in a way of, okay, this is music that would be, more worldly, and this is more music that's playing in the church. But I still looked at it as God breathed in a way where I was like, well, God, made the people who made the musical instruments, and now they're using it this way, but I'm not using it that way. I just want to take what God had given them as a musical gift and be able to pull from those ideas and be able to, learn a new technique that I wouldn't have learned if I would just continue to play the old hymns. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'm under the impression that if that music itself is just an art form that can express itself in all kinds of different ways, but it's amoral.
Yes.
In the sense there's no morality to the music itself. The lyrics, they're the ones that present the worldview. They present the perspective. And so the lyrics themselves can either be honoring to God or dishonoring to Him. They can be holy or unholy. They can be worldly or spiritual. But the music, that's just you're just putting those lyrics to that music.
Right.
And different cultures and different times are going to resonate with different kinds of music.
Yeah.
And but that's a great example of just like saying, well, if this is the type of music that our world listens to, then I can't have anything to do with that. I'm going to listen to music from 40 years ago, and somehow that makes it more holy.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Of course, 40 years ago, they were complaining about that music, saying that music was unholy.
Right.
The only difference, the only thing that made it unholy was that it was current.
Right. Yeah.
In their mind. That's what made it unholy.
Right. And I think you also do a really good job of keeping things current and encouraging us as a church staff to keep things current, but not lose sight of leading people to the cross. I think that's something that you do really well with us as a staff, so that's something that I always keep in mind. If we're going to do something and we're going to do it new, is it distracting and leading us away from the cross, or is it leading us closer? Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to circle back to what you said earlier about the uniqueness, because I think that actually ties in more than we even realize here. Because another tendency that we could have that would show that we're probably getting a little bit, we're misinterpreting what it means to be holy as being weird, is that we become Pharisaical. We become like Pharisees. And the Pharisees in the New Testament that Jesus had a problem with, these religious leaders they had problems with, he called them hypocrites.
Yeah.
The word hypocrites means, it's actually a term that came from the theater, and it meant to be acting a part or playing a part, wearing a mask, which is the way they would do theater back then. They would actually often have masks there. And so the idea there is that when we start wearing a mask, being someone different than who we are, and being less than authentic, then in that case, we're probably erring on the idea of making holiness be something different than what God calls it us to be, something weird or strange. I feel like sometimes, I don't know if you feel like this, but you and I being in ministry, sometimes people around us feel like they have to behave a little differently.
Sure.
Like, I have to be on my best behavior because I'm with a church staff person. And to me, that's the idea of putting on a mask. They're not being authentic.
Yeah.
They're not being real. I remember years ago, a guy told me he played on my when I was playing basketball 3-on-3. He came and played with us a few games, and he goes, "Man, I think I had a really good game today because I didn't swear in front of the pastor." And I'm going, I would be more offended if I'd be less offended by your language than I would by the way you played defense today. That was actually what was really, offending me.
And that critique is from a pastor. So,
exactly. You need to.
You should probably listen to me.
You need to play some defense as well. I mean, I get shoot the ball, sure, but but sometimes we feel like we have to change, right? We have to be different. And if you're trying to be different, then that's not true holiness.
No.
That's just putting on a mask.
Yeah.
And if we have this idea, to be holy means to be different than I am, and God wants us to grow, but He wants us to be authentic as we grow and become more and more like Him, and not try to just behave differently.
Right. Yeah. I it's tough too, because you want to be able to like set an example and set the tone, but you don't want to do it in an inauthentic way,
right.
And you want to be transparent, especially as people in ministry, you want to be transparent, but we also have the same, human tendencies as everyone else, so it's like you want to try and be closer to what Jesus is, and hopefully not do it in an inauthentic way or a hypocritical way. You want to also try to get there too,
And that's the person I want to be around. I want to be around the person who's making progress, but not necessarily trying to be perfect.
Yes.
Because we can't be perfect.
Right.
And Paul said just as much. He said in Philippians, he said, not that I've already attained it, or not that I've already made it, but I press on.
I press on.
Yeah. And that's the difference. It's like if you're wearing a mask, you're trying to be perfect. You're trying to say, I've already attained it. I'm there. I'm good.
Right.
And I'm more comfortable with the person who says, I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm making progress. But I'm trying to be real about it.
Right.
To me, that is a better mark of holiness than the person who just puts on a mask and tries to look like they're doing better than they are.
Right. To push forward, to know that our goal is to be like Christ, to share that with others, of what a great Redeemer and how His grace, is so, amazing in our lives, and we can see a lot of fruit from that, but do it in a real way,
Yes.
Yeah.
Real is the operative word there. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that leads to what I was going to say is the remedy.
Yeah.
The remedy of all this is the word authenticity.
Yeah.
And you just said real.
Right.
Same idea. It's just for us to be authentic and to be real and honest with our growth, our progress, to press forward. And I love this is what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 1:12. He says, our conscience testifies that we have conducted ourselves in the world. And so here's talking about being in the world, how we're to be holy in the world, conducted ourselves in the world, and especially in our relationships with you, with integrity and godly sincerity. Mm-hmm. And he goes on to say, we have done so relying not on worldly wisdom, but on God's grace. And so it's so interesting to me that a lot of times we picture holiness as just sort of like either whether we adopt the worldly ways or whether we attack them. But in reality, what Paul says here is that conducting ourselves in the world in a way that has integrity and sincerity is going to be is going to make us God's people. He was that was his aim. That's what he wanted to do. Is he wanted to have integrity. The idea of integrity is just be integrated. It really carries the idea of holiness. Just this whole person being integrated, and then he talks about being sincere, godly sincerity, which is this authenticity of being true to who we are, and then finally, not on worldly wisdom, but on God's grace, building it on God's grace. I think all those things really lend themselves to what it means to be authentic and truly ourselves, which is set apart. And I really believe our world is looking for that. Our world is looking for authentic people.
Yeah.
And to be different in this world is to be authentic, is to be unique. This brings you back to what you said at the beginning. When we are truly just not trying to fit in with the world, but trying to be unique to what God's called us to be, it's not going to show up because we just, are weird or different. It's going to show up because we have this integrity about it, this sincerity, honesty about who we are. I'm so attracted to people that are truly themselves. If they're truly being themselves, that to me is very winsome, and that's what more and more I long to be as well.
Right.
Like Paul. Not that I've achieved it, but that's what I'm moving towards. It's about different values, not weird behavior. Right. Is what God's calling us to.
Right. And I think that especially being a part of a church family is that you can encourage that. You can encourage people being authentically themselves, in a way that's glorifying to God, and encourage that and use that in our ministries. I know, I don't know if you've shared about shape stuff on here before, but,
I think maybe the first session, first season.
First season, maybe. But how you encourage people in our church, not only as staff, but, as members, to use their gifts, however God has created them, to use them either in the church or outside of the church, to use them in a way that is glorifying to God and pushes the gospel of Christ, forward, and you celebrate that, which is great. So, I think that's uniquely you, but also it's uniquely our church, is that we celebrate those gifts that God has given us.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you think I should grow my mustache back?
Oh, I am for sure. Yes. 110%.
See, now I'm thinking that would be weird now. Is it back?
Very in.
It's very in. All right.
Very in.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Morgan Wallen has one. Benson Boone has one.
This is the second week that you mentioned.
This is the second week of Morgan Wallen. Somebody's got to keep a tally now. On Morgan Wallen. Yeah, no, I'm saying everybody's got one right now.
All right.
Riley Green, he's another country artist. He's got one, so.
I couldn't even be this close to the microphone right now, though, because the mustache would be rubbing against it.
Let's not worry. I'll worry about that. You just do you. You do you, boo, and let me worry about the technical side of things.
All right. I'm not sure about that. That's funny. All right.
Yeah, see, look. See?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a nice, see?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's back in, man.
All right. Well,
if I could do it, I would. Mine, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Well, yeah, and that would be weird and different, so we don't want that.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully this has been a helpful conversation for you guys listening on as we've talked about just what it means to be holy, what it doesn't mean, how that looks. I think it's a healthy conversation for us to have, and not just to fall into sort of some stereotypes of what holy is. Our world has a problem if you come across holier than thou. You think about that expression. And I don't think that's what God's calling us to.
No,
He's not calling us to have this sort of this difference that is weird, that just makes people feel awkward and perhaps even judged. Rather, our life should be attractional for God and his people to those outside, clearly distinguishing between that which is sinful and the values of this world that are wrong. But that's often we often let that just infect the way we think about all kinds of things that are way more neutral.
Yes.
And probably not necessarily what it means to be holy.
Right. Very much so.
All right. Well, we got some time for a listener question. And by the way, last week we talked about the Huggies.
Yes.
You didn't have a chance to talk to Noah yet, did you? And
I
find
did.
out?
I did not, but I can guarantee that was nowhere near his creative inspiration for Unhurried.
Okay, we're gonna just put that away. That Huggies was not the creative. Although we will concur there's some similarities.
Yes. Yeah. I'll get an answer for sure, but no.
Yeah. All right. Last week we talked. It wasn't so much a question, but a comment that I did want to mention,
Sure.
which was really cool. We talked a little bit about the benefits of a bland or boring testimony.
Yes. Yeah.
And I got some good feedback from that. But one listener wrote, that she said, I've always been ashamed of her useless, what she called her useless testimony compared to the wonderful testimonies other people had. As I was born into the church, I felt like it was not very interesting, her testimony. So thank you very much. And I hope my kids would know that and that they agree to listen to it. So she wants to have her kids listen to it who also were raised in church.
Nice.
And to see the benefits of
a bland
testimony.
Right. Not that it's any useless. I feel like useless. That's a harsh word.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's not. I think that's what she's finding. It's very useful.
Yeah, it's very useful.
Yeah, very useful.
Yeah.
That's the way she saw it before.
Yes.
Before she heard the podcast,
Yeah.
she was thinking of it as useless. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, good to know that we love your feedback. A long way to say we love your feedback.
Yes.
Please let us know if you connect with any of this at all.
Yep.
I'll leave a comment. You could even win a hat. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then here's the question. We had a kind of a different question this week.
Yeah.
A lot of these are not that spiritual.
Okay. Hey, but that's uniquely us.
That's uniquely us. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it.
Let's go for it.
All right. So this listener asked, or actually a viewer, because he was commenting on the fact of what we were wearing in the studio. He said, "When did it get warm in the studio?"
Yeah.
And so, because, usually this room is very cold in
Yes,
the
it
winter.
is. Yes, it is.
And we were wearing, I was wearing sweatshirts and like jackets and everything in here. Now you're in a t-shirt.
I'm in a t-shirt.
I'm a short sleeve shirt.
Yeah, I'm in shorts. Yeah. It always changes. Anytime during the summer, it becomes a sauna in here. And then during the fall and the winter, it's an ice box. Yeah. So it just... Yeah, I think it changed about a month or so ago. I think
suddenly it's fine. It's comfortable in here.
It's nice now.
I don't have to wear my walnut cap, you know, and
right. Keep viewing. Sometime around August, maybe we'll wear tank tops because it's gonna be hot in here.
Be like a fan going in here. Yeah. My answer to that is, when did it get warm in the studio? As soon as I mentioned the man crush, it got hot in here.
Oh my gosh. I'm never going to be able to live that down.
All right. How do you get a hat? Again, just a reminder, if this is helpful, we'd love to just have leave a comment on the YouTube podcast. We'll put you in the drawing, and I think we've got 6 or 7 left, so we'll keep doing that for the weeks to come over the summer. And hopefully you can participate. You can also leave an email at unhurriedpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
Either place, and we'll put you in the drawing. So hopefully this has been encouragement to you. It's built upon a message I gave at Green Valley Church that was called "How to Explain What Your Faith Means to You." Actually, that's not what it was called. It was called, that was last week. The one for this week was "Living in a World That Pulls You Away from God."
Yeah.
So living in a world that pulls you away from God. We talked about blending and boasting versus belonging. Mm-hmm. And I think we can err on those 2 ways of either blending in or boasting. And I think today our conversation has been more along the boasting line. If you're falling into that error, you try to, you're trying to look good.
Right.
The way you're acting. And either blending or boasting is the wrong way to go. The right way to go is belonging to a God and reflecting who He is and His character.
Right. Yeah, you said yesterday too that like God is faithful, and to belong in that.
Yes.
To remember how faithful God has been to generations before us, and also in our life too. You know. So that was really cool. I liked how you kind of made that your last point. It's okay to boast. In Christ, we can boast, but we also belong to a very, very rich family. So,
yeah. Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the conversation and all that you do behind the scenes to make this happen. Thanks to our enthusiastic viewers and listeners. Until next time, this has been Unhurried with me, your host, Doug Kyle, and I look forward to talking soon.